that we are now live. I'm hoping we're live. So just let me know in chat if you're able to see and hear me. So welcome. This is the Assignment 2 live stream. So the hope is that this is going to give you an introduction to pretty much everything you'll need to know about Assignment 2. I'm joined by the lovely Zoe, who was Assignment 2's author. And together we'll be talking you through pretty much everything you need to know about Assignment 2. I just want to check quickly that both of us are in fact audible. So if you wouldn't mind just posting in chat just to let me know that you can hear us, and then we will get started right after that. I can see some emoji in chat, which I'm going to take as probably that's fine.
Hopefully.
Remember last time we started, and there's a yes as well. Last time we started the Assignment 1 live stream, and then I wasn't audible, and then I was audible but double, and then it was a bit of a mess. So hopefully this time will be, yes, lots of yeses. Excellent, 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 excellent. Okay. So let me pull up my slide deck. This is just a very brief sort of look through what we're doing today. 1511 Assignment 2 Pokedex, yippee, very exciting. What are we talking about? We'll be talking about what is Assignment 2 all about, so what content does it cover. We'll talk a little bit about Pokemon in general. Then we'll talk about some of the technical content of this assignment, so mainly linked lists, multi-file projects, and abstraction. We'll talk through very sort of generally what it is that we're doing in this assignment, and then we'll do a specific spec walkthrough. So we'll walk through Stage 1, Stage 2, and Stage 3. After that, we'll walk through how you get started on the assignment. After that, we'll look through the extension work briefly, and then we will give you some tips for working on the assignment at the end. Please, 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 if you have any questions at all, feel free to ask us. We're more than happy to answer questions as we go through. Though if you see that one of these things might answer your question, feel free to leave your question till that point, and then we can try and answer at that point there. There's one quick note that I just want to give, just to explain right at the start of this stream, just in case anyone's curious. Assignment 2 is still, if you look right at the top, it's got this little draft banner up here. We're expecting that'll be there for the next 24 hours or so. We're just putting the finishing touches on some of the auto tests, on some of the extension stuff. Releasing an assignment like this is quite large. We wanted to make sure that you had access to sort of the theory, the content, and the starter code, but the auto tests will be released relatively shortly. So just so everyone knows, if you find any little bugs, please post on the forum. We'll be rapidly fixing them, and this should be ready for everyone to use and properly start going in about 24 hours time or so. All right, so with that note out of the way, in fact, before we actually do anything else, Zoe, do you want to very briefly introduce yourself, just so everyone knows who you are as well?
Hi. Okay, yeah, so my name is Zoe. I've been a 1511 tutor for, I think, 2 terms besides this term. But I've been a tutor for like about 2.5 years, I think. I'm a 5th-year comp sci student, and I like Pokemon, which is why I decided to take this on. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. So, cool. Let's talk first of all about, Assignment 2 in general. What is Assignment 2? Why do we have an Assignment 2? One of the nice things about the assignments that we write is that every stage has a rationale, which explains to you exactly what you're expecting, what we're expecting that you'll learn, what we're all expecting that you'll do, and why you would want to do each stage. But in general, what is Assignment 2? Well, we're covering everything from week 1 to week 8-ish of COMP1511. So it's pretty much the entirety of the course, but with a focus on things like strings, structs, and linked lists. The biggest thing, of course, being linked lists. One important difference to Assignment 1 is that we handle all of the commands for you. So unlike in Assignment 1, where you had to do a lot of scanfing and you had to deal with the input from your user, for us, in this assignment, we take in all the commands, and what really happens is we just sort of call out to your functions. So you'll write a series of functions, we'll write the main function, and the main function eventually calls your function, and your function sort of finishes up and then sends information back to our main function. So it's a little bit different to Assignment 1 in that way. It's also, in terms of the amount of code that we have already given you, there's a lot more code that we've already given you. And this is actually quite typical of a normal software project. So if you were working on a real world software system, there'd be thousands and thousands of lines of code that you've already been given, and you'd have to make some smaller edits. We do a lot to make it slightly more accessible for you, but that's one of the intents of assignment 2, is to show you sort of a larger scale software project. A slightly larger scale, at least. Zoe, do you want to talk a little bit about Pokemon in general, since you're the Pokemon fan?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so brief introduction. So Pokemon is a game franchise that was established in the 90s. It started off on the Game Boy and has progressed through the ages until now. So if you've never played the game, you should have at least heard of Pokemon Go, which is a mobile app that many people became obsessed with quite a few years ago, enough to trespass and break laws. But yeah, disclaimer, you do not technically need any background info of Pokemon for you to be able to complete this assignment. But if you are a Poke fan like me, it might be a little easier to grasp the overall context. So the TLDR version is that Pokemon is short for pocket monsters. They're little animal-inspired creatures that you can catch and fight with. And for this assignment, we will be implementing something known as a Pokedex. So for those who don't know, a Pokedex is basically an encyclopedia that stores information of various types of Pokemon. If you play the game, basically when you as a Pokemon trainer, when you catch a Pokemon, the Pokedex records all the information and stores it for future use. In this assignment, we will be mimicking or somewhat emulating the experience of catching a Pokemon and therefore storing all the Pokemon's relevant information. Yeah, and we'll get into that later, how, the nitty-gritty of how this will occur. But yeah, back to you, Tom, for
cool.
The technical stuff.
I don't think I could have explained it better myself. I'm very glad that we got you on the staff to write this assignment. So thank you.
Good.
Cool. So the next thing I want to do is I want to talk briefly through some of the different technical content that we'll be looking at. This is going to be quite a high-level overview of what's going on, so certainly you'd want to get in touch with your tutor if any of these things are really confusing and you're not sure that you understand them, but there'll also be something that we're focusing on in the content of the next few weeks' labs as well. So starting off with the first big thing, which is linked lists. The Pokedex is in fact a linked list. So the way that it works is there are 3 types of nodes that you'll be using. The Pokedex is sort of the big node that represents the entire Pokedex and comes before the head of the linked list. So it's going to basically be a representation of an entire Pokedex. Inside of it, it contains multiple dex nodes, which are individual nodes in a linked list. And so each dex node will be the thing that has a next pointer, which points to another Pokedex, which points to another Pokedex, and so on, until it points at null. So this dex node bit is probably the bit that you've already seen in your labs this week. You may have even had your tutor explaining to you the idea of having one of these Pokedex nodes, probably called something like a list node, to sort of hold the entire list. The thing that's somewhat new, possibly, from what you've seen in your labs this week is these Pokemon. So in addition to dex nodes pointing to other dex nodes, each dex node also points to a Pokemon. And a Pokemon represents a bunch of information about, the name of the Pokemon, the types of the Pokemon, all those sorts of things. And so what we're going to be doing throughout this entire assignment, technically, is we're going to be manipulating, adding to, removing from, changing these structs, changing these nodes in a linked list. And some of it's also going to involve looking at functions that work on Pokemon. So for instance, if you want to understand what the name of a Pokemon is, you might need to call a function to identify that. That's the high-level summary of how linked lists play into this. We'll probably come back to this diagram again when we're looking at specific examples of Pokemon, or Pokedexes as well. The second thing I'll talk about is multi-file projects. Like I said earlier, this is a bigger piece of code, or at least we've given you a lot more code to start with. There are 9 files, 7 of those which you'd use in the regular assignment, and an extra 2 files which you'll need for the extension. What we'll do, can I increase the volume a bit more? I can certainly try. One moment. How is that? Is that any better? Let me know in chat if that's hurting your ears or anything, but we'll see if that's better. There's only one file which you need to make textual edits to, at least for the main part of the assignment, and that's Pokedex.c. In other words, all the other files, you only need to read them. You should never be writing to them. In fact, if you try and write to them, you might be causing yourself a headache because you can't submit those files. The only file you can submit is Pokedex.c. But there are other files which are somewhat important. I'll walk through them very briefly. Pokedex.h contains a list of all the functions that you're implementing in Pokedex.c. It's particularly useful because it contains a specification for each of those functions. So unlike in assignment 1, where you would have seen that content was in the sort of the website that we've got, most of the content now is actually stored in that .h file, and it explains what the arguments are, what you're expected to return, and what it's going to do to your Pokedex. Pokedex.c, as I said, is where you actually put all of your code. You've then got Pokemon.h and Pokemon.c, which is where you can find all the information about Pokemon. So things like the struct for the Pokemon should be defined somewhere there, as is functions that do things like return to you a name or something like that. You've then got a main.c, which is where the code that deals with input is. You've got Pokemon types.h and .c, which contain a bunch of information, particularly about the types of Pokemon. And then those last two files, x, save.h and c, are only relevant for the extension. So if you're only planning on doing stages 1, 2, and 3, you won't need to worry about those. Zoe, do you want to take over talking about the rest of the technical content?
Yep, sure. Just one thing. Do you think you can make the slides a bit bigger? Because I feel like
can certainly try.
Yeah.
Let me see if that's going to help.
I feel like it might be too small for students to see.
Yes, absolutely fair. It's a bit of a pain. Give me 1 second. I will try and do it. There we go. F11. There we go. Is that better?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Cool, thank you. And to Brandon's question, yes, this is recorded.
Okay. All right, so first thing you really want to go over is type defs. So by now you should know what a type def is, but for the sake of ease of writing, we have used type def. So for example, like with Pokedex, we will be using capital P Pokedex to indicate struct Pokedex star. The same goes for Pokemon and the same goes for Dex node. So please take note of this before you start writing. Make sure you fully understand what the type def does and what it represents before you start, right? Moving on to the next slide. So I'll be going on, I'll be talking about abstraction. So something that I didn't know when I was a COMP1511 student is that, say for example, you're in a file and it says #include Pokemon.h. All that really means is for you as a user, you as the coder, you as the student, you only need to look at Pokemon.h. So for example, right, looking at all these different files that we have, there's about 10 and it might be very overwhelming, but the good thing about this is that all these .h and .c files are here for you, for the whole Pokedex to work in cohesion with each other. All you really need to do and all you need to know or use are the functions in Pokemon.h, for example, right? So as a student, I was quite confused. I'm like, okay, well, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. I have to malloc for a Pokemon. I have to free it. I have to, assign all of these attributes. But the thing is, no, if you read the Pokemon.h file, there are actually functions that do that for you. So for example, you have new_Pokemon, which if you give it the ID, the name, the height, etc., then it will actually do all those things for you. And the beauty of it is that you know that these functions exist. You don't actually know, but the thing is you don't need to know what goes behind the scenes and how they actually work. You just need to know that these functions exist and that they do work. So that takes care of a lot of things for you, and that's known as abstraction. Yeah, all you really need to take note of is the input, the output, and the name of the function, and you'll be fine. So just to reiterate, right, so in this .h file, you have a type def struct Pokemon star and then capital P Pokemon, right? The actual struct definition and all of the fields inside it are inside Pokemon.c, but you technically don't need to know that. So you shouldn't be accessing Pokemon arrow ID or Pokemon stab ID. Instead, you should be using the function Pokemon_ID and then putting Pokemon inside it as an argument. Yeah, so the other thing that I did want to go over, so if you notice the second last and third last functions in this list, so there's Pokemon first type and Pokemon second type. So I hope this isn't a mouthful, but note that the return type of these two functions are Pokemon underscore type. So that's whatever's in green, right? If we move on to the next slide, um, we are now looking at Pokemon underscore types.h. So in this .h file are two functions that can convert a Pokemon underscore type to a string and then back. So please note that you will definitely need these two functions to be able to properly print the Pokemon's type. And going back a slide again, all of these functions inside Pokemon.h, you will have to use every single one of them at some point in time. So please make sure to have a read of this and I guess grasp what's kind of happening. And eventually you'll be able to get a hang of it and be able to piece all the functions together to get what you want, right? Yeah, that's it for me. Thanks, Mom.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's really great advice, particularly about, there's a lot of stuff here, but a lot of the .c files, apart from Pokedex.c, we really don't need to know how to use them. And for the .h files, there may be a lot of stuff in there, but you'll be using a lot of it, but you don't really need to understand how it works. You can just understand that it exists. I'd recommend certainly if you have like a piece of paper or something, you can sort of take notes on what the really important functions are, and you can sort of have a quick read through and say, oh, I might need this thing, I might need this thing, I might need this thing, and just keep a note of it. And then when you come back to it later and like, oh, I needed that thing from earlier, having that piece of paper might really help. Okay, I think that's all of that. Excellent. So going back to the outline then. We've spoken through all of the technical content. So we've spoken about linked lists, we've spoken about multi-file projects, we've spoken about abstraction, which is this idea of having .c files that we don't really need to worry about because all we care about is the .h file that describes it. Let's now talk about what is your job? What are we doing in this assignment? Basically, and it might be useful at this point if I actually pull up a copy of the assignment. Here we go. Here is the Pokedex.c file. I'll open it up in my web browser. Your job is to fill in all of the functions that say, oh, hey, you need to implement this function here. So it says, oh, hey, you haven't implemented this thing, you haven't implemented this thing, and so forth. Your job is going to be to go through and implement each of these Pokedex.c functions. Now, in order to do that, you may also possibly need to create some of your own functions. In fact, we'd certainly recommend that creating your own functions to do things that come up a lot might be useful. You'll also need to possibly create your own structs, but definitely you'll need to modify the structs that we've given you. So we've given you a struct Pokedex and we've given you a struct Pokenode, a struct Dex node, I should say. These are things that you're almost certainly going to need to change yourself. The one thing you won't need to change is the struct Pokemon. So individual Pokemons, we've already implemented that for you. You don't need to worry about changing that struct, and in fact, you can't change that struct. Okay. So, yep, your job, go through, implement each of the stages here. In accordance with, there are two places you can find instructions. There are general instructions inside of the wiki. So we sort of say, here's a reference implementation, and then sort of the task. So we sort of describe stage 1 to you and exactly what's going on. We describe then in a bit less detail stage 2, and then again we'll describe stage 3, stage 4, and stage 5. But the other place that you can go for all the details about what you're implementing is Pokedex.h. So let's also open that one up. So here we've got the information about, if you're wondering, say, oh, what should add Pokemon do? Oh, here we go. It should add a new Pokemon to the Pokedex. It says something about being found. Tells us what the currently selected Pokemon should be. It tells us about Pokemon IDs. Tells us about all these different pieces of information. But this is the reference for how add Pokemon should work. Now, for stage 1, we give you a little bit of extra help in the web page that we've got here. But certainly for the later stages, the main thing you'll be looking at is the Pokedex.h. Okay, that's sort of a general summary of what we're doing. I'll note that there's a bit of extra work, again, kind of like assignment 1 for the extension work, but we'll come to that near the end of today. Should we do a walk through the spec, Zoe? Cool, alrighty. So let's start at the beginning. The very first thing that we've got is just an introduction to Pokemon. This introduction we've basically already given you. Zoe gave an excellent introduction to Pokemon in general, and also there's a little bit about Pokedexes here. The next thing we tell you is about all of the files that we give you. Now, like we said, the main thing you'll be reading is the Pokedex.H, and the only thing for the core stages that you'll be changing is the Pokedex.C. But there are a few things that may be useful in the other .H files, mainly Pokemon.H and Pokemon types.H. I'd suggest, unless you're really interested in how things work, you don't need to worry about what's inside any of the other .C files. So main.C, Pokemon.C, I wouldn't worry too much about checking out what's inside of them, unless there's something you're really curious about. And if you've got a question about them, it might also be useful to ask that question on the forum as well, rather than just going into them yourself. There's information about how you can set up these files. So there's this command. There's a zip file which you can download, and there is also instructions here that you can copy and paste, which show you exactly what we're doing. So these instructions: make a directory, change directory into it, and then copy a bunch of files in. Mainly they copy in the Pokedex.C file and then create what we call links, which are shortcuts on Windows, where you basically say, hey, I just want to refer back to the latest version of Pokemon.C or Pokemon.H. We also describe the reference implementation, which is basically the source of truth for how things work. Your program should behave exactly like the reference implementation. That's there. Cool. A little bit more information. And then we get on to the tasks. Alrighty. So there are 5 stages. Stages 1, 2, 3 are part of the core. Stages 4 and 5 are part of the extension. Stage 1 is additionally split up into 2 smaller parts to try and make it sort of easier to understand. You can read the rationale for why this stage exists, but for stage 1 at least, we're expecting pretty much everyone to have a go and hopefully get through all of stage 1. So it gives you the instruction. You should compile your code. You'll get ./Pokedex, but then you haven't implemented the add Pokemon function, and it now tells you, hey, time to implement add Pokemon. You can read through the instructions. Then there are also some tips about how exactly things work in this assignment. And then we also give you some hints around other things that you could implement. So you might need to add code to the create new dex node function. And then when you're done, this is what you should see. We also tell you about some other functions you may need to implement to be able to tell if things really work. And then at the end of this stage, we also make a point of telling you, hey, if you've got more questions, look at Pokedex.H. And that's a common theme throughout each stage, is we're going to say, hey, if you've got more questions, if there's something that's not clear, check out Pokedex.H for more information. There's a few more tips. And then we finally say, okay, cool. Once you've read through all of that, here is how you can check that your first part of stage 1 works with these few functions. Or with these few commands, I should say. So we add a Bulbasaur, we describe it, we print out the whole Pokédex, and then we can add another Pokemon and print that out again. Anything I've missed or anything you want to add, Zoe? Cool. Awesome. I was going to use that to sneakily cover up me taking a drink. One moment. Very stealthy. If any of you ever have to give a lecture, one of the best pieces of advice that I got after I gave my first lecture was bring a drink of water with you, because, it really does something funny to the vocal cords. Anyway, so then we get on to part 2. Part 2 is once we've implemented basically adding Pokemon to our Pokédex, which is the summary of what this is. It's adding Pokemon and then printing them out again. We then expect you to implement moving the cursor. So this is basically a way of, you can kind of have a particular selected Pokemon. So you might have 4 or 5 Pokemon, but you can say, hey, this one is currently selected and I want to change it, I want to delete it, those kind of things. That's what this moving the cursor is for. So, for this part, you're implementing moving a cursor, we'll explain to you, hey, this is what we're going to do. You're going to implement next Pokemon, previous Pokemon, and jump Pokemon, which move around where that cursor is. And then you can find out the exact instructions for which functions or how to implement those functions in Pokedex.h, but you'll implement them in Pokedex.c. Have I missed anything there? I don't think so. Cool, awesome. Great, then we jump on to stage 2. Oh, and by the way, once you're done with the stage, you can also run the auto test stage command, and that will run all the auto tests for that particular stage. Again, that's one of the things that isn't yet set up, but will be set up in the next 24 hours or so. Cool, so we then get on to stage 2, which is finding Pokemon. This introduces an added sort of concept to our Pokedex, which is the idea that we can have information about some Pokemon which haven't been found yet. So it's kind of like you can imagine you're exploring the world. Maybe you've got a Pokemon, but you've heard about it, but you haven't found it yet. That's what we're trying to represent here. You can read the rationale about why this exists, but basically it's sort of more extending upon what you've already written. So you'll need to make some changes to print Pokedex and to detail current Pokemon. And then you'll also complete the set current Pokemon found, the insert Pokemon before current, and the count Pokemon of type functions. So you can read a little bit more about what exactly is going on here. That's another tip about exactly how it works. And again, we give you a demonstration of how this is supposed to work. So you can see, again, we can add a Pokemon, we can describe it, we can print it, and now we can say, hey, find this particular Pokemon. And when you describe it again, what you'll see is that before, when we described that Pokemon, it gave us all the information. It said, hey, this is a Bulbasaur, it's got this height, this weight, and this is its type. But now it says, oh, asterisks. You're not allowed to know what its name is or what its height is or what its weight is. And the idea is that you can only know these things if you set it as found. And so that's what the F command does. That sets it to found or not found. And then the describe and print commands behave differently based on whether something has been found or not. There's also inserting the Pokemon before the current one, which is described in detail here. And you can see exactly how that command works here. Okay, cool. And that's all of stage 2 then. And again, if you've got questions about how those particular functions work, you can read Pokedex.h to get more detail about that. Have I missed anything there, Zoe? Anything else you want to add?
I guess like the reason why we introduce like whether a Pokemon is set as found or not, like at this stage, is so that you have, I guess, like the groundwork, you have the foundation already ready. For example, like with detailed Pokemon and with print Pokedex, you can view everything that you have inserted or added to the Pokedex like immediately. But then we want you to be able to then like make a new iteration of those functions and improve it to like implement new functionality. Yeah,
definitely. This is something that happens really commonly in like in larger software projects is, you get asked, hey, your boss, in fact, this has happened with Zoe a bunch of times where I've said, hey, we should implement this thing. And then Zoe goes away and does a great job implementing it and comes back and I say, oh, and you know what would be even better if we implement it this way instead. And then Zoe sort of turns off her camera and mic, sort of curses me, throws like darts at the dartboard on the back of the door.
No, that is not how it works.
And then goes away and re-implements things. So you can imagine that getting up to stage 2 is kind of like having me tell you, hey, we actually need this new feature. So that's stage 2. Stage 3 is then described here, and the things that does is that destroys the list, and it also has some more complicated things around showing statistics around your Pokemon. So destroying the list is going to be all about removing Pokemon from the Pokedex and then removing the entire Pokedex. It's at this point when we start testing you on, are you able to free your Pokedex correctly? So that's something that we'll be looking at in this stage. And then the other things are showing out your types and then counting different numbers of Pokemon. So there's more linked list operations going on here, just setting you on, do you know how to count the number of things in your Pokedex? Can you implement an algorithm to move around your linked list? Those kind of things. And again, there's more information here, and there's also more information in Pokedex.H. After that point, we get up to the extension work. This should probably have an extra heading there. I may have missed out on a heading. But anyway, between stage 3 and stage 4, there's a bit of information about the change from regular assignment work, from core assignment work to extension assignment work. And that works very similarly to how assignment 1 worked. So it's pretty much the same vibe as what we did for last time. Now, we'll leave the extension component for a little bit. I'm just going to skip past it. We'll come back to it after we get through the rest of the spec. Below the extension submission stuff, there's some information briefly about, hey, here is how you can actually read and write your own test cases. Kind of useful, especially if you're doing the extension part of the assignment. You might want to be able to describe your own test cases and then see how they work. A little bit of information there. There is a list of add Pokemon commands. If you're curious about how you can, about different examples of commands that you can use, you can go to this link. There's the credits with the long list of people who have contributed to this assignment. And then we get down to the sort of more formal parts of this assessment, which is just saying, hey, here are the conditions on how you can complete this work. So you can't use joint work, you can't use code synthesis tools, you are not allowed to share, publish, or distribute your assignment work, so please don't put this on GitHub, or at least put it publicly on GitHub, either during or after the term. So there's all that information, a little bit more information there. There's also information about submission. Obviously, again, because this is a draft, the auto test commands don't yet exist, but we all expect that they'll exist in the next sort of 24 hours or so. And there's also a bit of information about the assessment scheme and exactly how that works. Very similar, again, to how assignment 1 worked. Cool. So what I'm going to do there, I'm going to pause for a second. There are 2 questions in the chat, and they're, in fact, Zoe's answered one of the questions, but we might say that on voice as well so everyone can see it. So Zoe, does F0 mean Pokemon not found?
Yes, that is correct, Tom. F0 means setting the Pokemon as not found. And similarly, saying F1 means setting the Pokemon as found. So 1 means true, 0 means false.
Cool. So that's in the context of if I've added a Pokemon, by default it gets added as found, but then I can use the commands F0 and F1 to either set it as not found or set it as found. Thank you. The other question is, will the auto test have memory leak checkers built in? I'll take that one. The answer is yes, they will. So for stage 3, we'll automatically turn on leak checking, and we'll check that you always deal with your memory. Are there any other questions? We'll give it another sort of 30 seconds now. So if anybody has any questions, this would be a great time to ask about anything in the regular component of the assignment. Anything at all that you're curious about in terms of Pokedex, feel free to ask us now. I'm going to take a long drink from my water bottle, and then we can move on.
Actually, one thing that I wanted to make sure to clarify is that with the first add Pokemon function, by default, the Pokemon is found. But with the insert Pokemon before current, that the default of the Pokemon is actually unfound. So just please make note of those differences. Yeah.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. Something else I wanted to say. Oh yes. I was giving this piece of advice to somebody else earlier today. If you're ever in an interview and you're worried about getting a difficult question, always have a bottle of water nearby, because then when they ask you, the hard question about, oh, tell us about that time in 1511 when you were doing Pokedex stuff, there's a drink of water. There's a great question about how do I get started. We'll answer that at the end, because we've got a whole thing to talk about in terms of tips on getting started. So definitely stick around to the end, and we'll cover that in a lot more detail then. Okay, so actually the first part of how to get started I will answer right now. And I'm sorry, Zoe, but this is probably going to involve me taking you off my screen, because I'm going to need a full screen for the lab. So let's pull that up now. And we'll log in off screen so that nobody steals my password. We need like intermission music or something like that. Or maybe we could get like the Pokemon music. I assume there's Pokemon music. Very exactly. There we go. Very good.
Sorry.
No, thank you. I appreciate the intermission music. Okay, so here is my blank terminal. And you can ignore that command at the top. That's just to get the positioning of the terminal right. Let's now jump into the assignment spec. Let's say you want to get started, just in terms of I'd like to have all of the code on my computer. Great plan, I say. So we go up to the top of this spec, and we can have a read through, and we can say, it says somewhere around here. Here is where you can grab all the files. Now there's a zip file if you're working on your own computer, but the easiest way to grab the files is to copy these instructions, I would say. Now I am going to cd into a different directory because otherwise I'm going to bump into the files that I already have. But if you paste those files in, there we go. If I now ls, so showing everything in my current directory, you can see that I've got these 9 files. I've got extension save stuff, which we don't need to worry about for this particular, at least for the core stages. Main.c, Pokedex.c, Pokedex.h, Pokemon.cnh, and Pokemon types cnh. So once we've got those files, we can obviously have a look through all of them. The relevant ones to probably take a look at to start with are Pokedex.c and Pokedex.h. I have made a classic mistake here. I'm just going to go back and put an ampersand at the end of my getIt command. And here we can see here is Pokedex. So walking through the code, there's a section at the top where you can add any extra hash includes, you can add any extra hash defines, you can change the struct Pokedex and the struct dex node. So if you're looking to add a piece of information to the dex node, which you'll almost certainly need to do, and if you're looking to add information to the Pokedex, that is where you would do that. And then as you scroll down this file, there's also space for your own structs and your prototypes for your own functions. Then we get to the functions that we say, hey, you should probably implement these. So for instance, you should implement new Pokemon, you should implement create new dex node, and then add Pokemon, print Pokedex, so on, so on, so on, so on. You can go down this file. At the end of the file, there's also space for you to implement your own functions, though please feel free, if you'd like to add function if there's a function that's relevant to stage 3, feel free to add it next to the stage 3 function. That's okay. But there's space specifically for you to add extra functions down the bottom if you'd like to. So that's the .c file. You can also look at the .h file if you would like to. So the .h file, as you can see, it defines the capital P Pokedex, and then it walks through. You've got a new Pokedex, you've got a add Pokemon function, you've got a this is going to be the print Pokemon function, I assume, or print Pokedex function, yep. And it goes through and describes in detail each of those functions. Okay, so we've done a great job. We've gotten all our files. Let's now run DCC. DCC, you may not be used to running it with more than one file at once, but the way that we do this is we say DCC-O Pokedex, and then you'll need to name all of the C files that are involved. So in this case, it's Pokedex.c, Pokemon.c, oh, I can't spell, Pokemon types.c, and I think that's it. Have I missed one? I've forgotten main.c. Main.c, there we go. Excellent. So what this does is we've now got in our home directory a Pokedex executable, Pokedex program. I can run /Pokedex. Now, this is a very simple Pokedex because we haven't implemented any code yet. There's basically only one thing it can do, which is type in the question mark command, which shows you a list of every possible command that you'll be able to implement by the end. So you can read through and have a look at the different commands that we'll ask you to implement. Don't worry too much about reading through all of them in the first instance, because before you get to stage 4, you don't really need to worry about saving and loading files, so you can kind of ignore those. But certainly you'll be needing to do things like add and print pretty quickly. If I tried to add a Pokemon, let's follow the instructions. says add a Pokemon ID, a name, height, weight, type, and type. Add a Pokemon ID, a name. Pikachu is the only Pokemon I know off by heart. A name, a height. I'm going to say it's pretty short. 0.3. A weight. Probably also pretty light. Let's go with like probably the same size as my cat. So like 5 kilos. Type 1. Anyone know what Pokemon's types, what Pikachu's types are? I assume it's like electric.
Yeah, electric and then none.
Cool. Oh no, but unfortunately we haven't implemented this function yet. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do now. So we'd go in and we'd make some changes to that function so that it now works, so that it actually creates the Pokemon. Okay, let's say that we've done a brilliant job where we're ready to auto test. You can run 1511 auto test Pokedex.c. At the moment, this command won't work because this is still a draft, but shortly this command will work. And similarly, you'll be able to run give cs1511 to Pokemon Pokedex, I should say. Pokedex.c. That again should work. Cool. So that's the technical instructions for how you actually just sort of get the files in your account and start writing. Okay, I'll give another second for if there are any questions. Zoe, did you have anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Excellent. Okay, so awesome. I'm going to briefly go through the extension now, and then we'll finally get around to just sort of general advice as a whole. So let's jump back to here. The extension is the exact same as it was in assignment 1, in that the extension is designed to test you on more than just writing code. The other two things that you'll need to do is you'll need to, in addition to implementing some extra functionality, write an explanation of what you've done, and then you'll also need to write 2 tests. So 2 test cases just that show that you've thought about, hey, maybe this edge case might pop up. And what will happen is we'll run your test against our reference solution as well as against against your solution. If they produce the same output, then your test is correct. And what will happen is after the assignment, once we've got all the extension submissions, we will put them all together and we will run each test against each other person's code. And we turn that into marks based on, first of all, did you implement the correct functionality? But also, if you write a really devious test that might catch somebody out, we'll see that and you get extra marks for that. So it's kind of a fun little bit of extra competition. Notably, you can get full marks without anybody else's code passing, but certainly you're able to get bonus marks almost by writing tests that catch other people out. So that's kind of fun. Cool. So there are 2 extensions. Extension stage 4 is saving and loading the Pokedex. This is also a bit interesting because what this will require you to do is to write the entire state of the Pokedex out to a file and then load it back in again. So we give you the code to do the writing and loading into files. So it's really just sort of writing it into a string and then turning a string back into a Pokedex. But it turns out that this is a really common thing that we want to do in programming, being able to what we call encode and decode information. And certainly it will give you a lot of experience with strings, as well as a lot of experience with making and building Pokedexes and linked lists in general, I suppose. So there's a little bit of a description here about how that works. And then for stage 5, we talk about getting sublists. So sublists are basically kind of like searching your Pokedex. And what will happen is you'll be able to take your Pokedex and sort of find the relevant parts of it and put it into another Pokedex for you to have a look through. So if you've got a Pokedex with like 100 elements, you might be able to search through it, find the 20 matching Pokemon, put them into a separate Pokedex, and then you can look through only those. Those are the vague descriptions of the extension activity. If you get to those stages, you'll have lots of fun and look at doing lots of interesting things with them. But that is the summary there. Zoe, have I missed anything? Anything that you want to add? Anything that might be useful to bring up?
I think you said everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, so that's sort of the summary of the extension, which leaves us with one thing left to talk about. Tips for working on the assignment. What I might do first is I'll just sort of go through briefly how I would get started on this assignment. And then Zoe, if you've got any extra advice, and I know you've got some tips as well, absolutely give those tips, and I'll also give some tips as well. This is also a great point. If you've got any questions, please ask them in chat, and we'll happily answer them as we're talking about working on the extension for the assignment. Is that an all right plan, Zoe? All good with you?
All good, yeah.
Alrighty then. So, how to get started? I realize that there is a lot going on in this assignment, right? Unsurprisingly, there's quite a few functions that are going on. There are quite a few different things at play here. So, I would suggest trying to simplify it. The first thing I would do, get all the files, but just remember, the main.c file, Pokedex types.c file, Pokemon types.c file, and the Pokemon.c file, you won't really need to read them. The .h files, yes you will, but not the .c files. I think it would be a good idea, before even starting this assignment, to just try and get a piece of paper out and write down, Pokedex, Dexnode, and Pokemon, and just have a quick think about, where can I find the different things for each of them? Certainly to think about, what do they have, and to draw out this diagram that we showed you earlier, somewhere around here. This one here. Just so you can get in your head these three different things. You've got the Pokedex, the Dexnode, and the Pokemon. It's good to just have a quick understanding of vaguely what's going on here. Once you've done that, the next thing that you'll need to do, and the first thing you'll actually do in terms of coding, is be thinking about adding Dexnodes and Pokemon to your Pokedex. Now, this is very similar to code that you will have written in your labs this week, I believe, and certainly more code that you write next week in your labs, where what you're doing is you're putting a Pokemon via a Dexnode into your list. And so that's going to be the add Pokemon function here. And what this should do is it should call new Dexnode, use some of the Pokemon functions, should use the Pokemon that it's provided, use the Dexnode that it's provided, and put that into the Pokedex. This will be very similar to code that you've looked at that's inserting into a linked list. So I would even have next to you a piece of code that explains how you do that in general with a linked list, so that you can sort of compare, does this look about the same? Is this doing the right thing? Once you've taken that step, the other thing that you'll need to implement is the print Pokedex function. Once you've implemented this, you can check that your add Pokemon function works correctly. So those two there, that should be your first step. Can I add the Pokemon into the Pokedex, and can I then print out the Pokedex again? Once you've done that, the other functions that are there, the get current Pokemon and the detail current Pokemon functions, should be relatively easy to implement. They add this concept of a current thing, but given, I believe, am I correct in saying that it's always the first thing that's the current thing in stage one, Zoe? Is that right?
Yes, current is always the first one.
So for stage one, all these are saying is please print out the detail of the first Pokemon and then return the first Pokemon in the linked list. So for stage one, they're actually quite easy functions to write. So that's all you need to do for stage one. Now, I'll admit, it might sound, some of you might sound like, oh my God, that's a lot of code. For some of you, it might sound like, hey, that's, actually, it's only 4 functions. It's not massive. A lot of the work that you'll be doing is just understanding that you've got these 3 Pokedex, Dexnode, Pokemon things, and you're going to have to sort of get them straight in your head and get them inserted correctly. Once you've done that, I would work through the rest of the functions in pretty much in the order that they're in Pokedex.h. So the assignment is designed so it sort of builds on top of itself, and each function will add a new feature. Each stage will add something a little extra that you'll need to do. So, for instance, for moving the cursor, this sort of adds a little bit extra to your the functions that involve current Pokemon, and it certainly will ask you to add the next Pokemon and the pre-Pokemon and the jump Pokemon functions. Once you've done stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and keep on going from there. Anything to add there, Zoe?
Well, yeah, I was gonna giving tips on like how to start really. It's just that it might be good to kind of just like look briefly over like the functions and see, okay, what do I need? Because the way this assignment is designed is that you do have a bit of like creative like license, right? You can add as many fields as you want to like the struct dex node or even to the struct Pokedex. So sometimes it is good to draw out like, okay, actually this will be very useful. And you're like, oh, actually, yeah, this function needs that, so I might as well do this. So if you like start to brainstorm before starting and just, I guess, get an overall holistic view of what you need, it might help you a lot more in the future, instead of jumping back and forth and be like, oh, oops, I forgot that. Like,
Yeah. So it's good to have a sense of sort of for the first stage at least what's going on. I'd be careful about going too far with that. Like, don't go and have a look at stage 4 and stage 5 if you're really trying to get your head around stage 1. But certainly having a bit of a sense of, okay, these are the functions in stage 1 and the things that I'm going to be dealing with, and a sense of, by the end of stage 1, this is what my Pokedex is going to look like. That's probably a really, really good idea. Is that about what you were saying, Zoe, or?
yeah. Sorry,
No.
not going too far. Yeah.
Yeah, like I just want to be clear. You don't need to worry about stage 5 if you're still in stage 1.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I think that's everything I wanted to say just about like getting started. Zoe, do you have general tips, advice that you want to bring up? I'll put you back on the screen.
Yeah.
Please.
So generally, I mean, yeah, start early. Honestly, like me and Tom, we're both students too. Okay, we know that there's like that 1 week period where you just really don't want to touch an assignment. If you really don't want to work on it, that's fine. But please have a read of it, at least so you can get a bit of an understanding what you need to do. It helps to just have it at the back of your head. At least, yeah, it's better to look at it than to not look at it at all, right? Because at least you had time for it to simmer and to develop in your head, that kind of stuff.
I'd add to that as well. It is not that hard to copy the files into your account. And certainly that's something that you can do right now, copy paste. And then you can also feel a bit better and say like, okay, I've gotten started. I've copied the files over. It can be good just to get that one little thing of opening up the assignment, copying over the files, maybe even looking through them and get it, just so that you've done enough that you can you've got your foot in the door. And then again, you're going to want to try and get a little bit of the first function written so you can just get your foot in the door. Because once you've gotten your foot in the door, then it's a lot easier to sort of keep going and build up on top of that. Sorry to steal that tip, Zoe, but...
No, that's fine. Totally agree.
Do you want to keep going? Anything else that you wanted to add for tips?
Tips. Yeah, read the .h files. Don't know if I can stress that enough. It's a lot to read, and it's a lot to read through the spec itself. But I mean, we wrote it there for a reason, right? So please check that out. Yeah, I think that's it.
Cool. Yep, definitely. I'd add, in terms of tips, help sessions, really, really useful.
Oh yeah,
the other tip with help sessions is go early, because if you've got questions and you go to the help session that's on tomorrow or the day after, you'll get a lot more sort of time with a tutor than if you do go the day before the assignment is due. So that's definitely something I would recommend. If you're overwhelmed, if you're not sure about something, talk to your tutor, please. Zoe and I, both tutors, we both know that, if a student comes up to us and is like, hey, I'm really confused with this Pokedex thing, we'll sit down with you and go through it. So please don't get worried. If you are really struggling, really not sure, that's definitely something you can do. More generally, I'd say the university has a bunch of support services as well. So if you're like even more stressed about this, and it's really not just like, oh, Pokedex is annoying, but it's like, my God, everything's going wrong at the same time. I've got a billion assignments. Oh my God. That's definitely a time when have a chat to a tutor. We can refer you on to some of the university services that are really useful there. Using the reference implementation, it might be a good idea as well if you're just playing around with things. Open up that reference implementation, play around with it a little bit so you can get a sense of what it's actually doing. Have a look through that like question mark help page and you can see exactly what the things that you'll be implementing are and kind of get excited. Any other tips that I can think of? I can't. Those are all the main things I would say. Cool. So, we said we finished at 6, but I'm happy to stick around for a little bit afterwards. The main thing I want to get now is questions. So if there are any questions at all, please chuck them in the chat. There's a few that I can already see there. There's a question about the with 1-digit IDs having 2 leading zeros. Zoe, I'm not sure if you have an answer for that straight away. If you don't have one,
yeah.
Yep.
So yes, that's true that it should depend on the highest ID in the Pokedex, but I think the minimum is 3 digits. So once it surpasses 3 digits, it'll hit 4, if that makes sense. I'll make that more clear on the spec.
Cool. Yeah. So it's a minimum of 3, and then it goes up from there. Cool. There's another question from Neoxtra, which is, will we be getting feedback for our first assignment? Yes, absolutely you will. It's funny you say that because in about half an hour's time, we're going to have a meeting with all the tutors talking about marking assignment 1. So very well-timed question. We expect that will be ready by the middle of next week for most students. For students with extensions, it might take a bit longer. But those marks will start going out in the next few days and certainly be ready by middle of next week would be the plan. So the feedback will be mostly on your style. You'll also obviously get the marks for that assignment. You'll be able to see those. I think that hopefully answers that question. If you've got concerns about that, please get in touch with your tutor as well. Your tutor can have a chat to you about it too. Any other questions, please feel free to post in chat. Give it another minute or two just in case there's other people who are thinking, oh, maybe I should type out a long question or a long rant in chat about, oh my goodness, Pokedex. This video will be posted afterwards on YouTube. It'll also get posted on Echo 360 and on, mainly on those 2 places, I guess. So certainly you'll be able to find it there. I'm going to try and timestamp it so that if you're looking for, what was that time when they were talking about stage 2, you can jump to that timestamp straight away. Hopefully that'll happen soon, probably Thursday or Friday. Anything else I can think of that's useful to mention? Enjoy yourselves as well. Pokedex is fun. Its Pokemon are fun. It's a good theme, I hope. Especially if you're somebody who's really interested in Pokemon, I hope that you can enjoy it and that you find it interesting. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it as far as things that we wanted to say. We'll give it another 60 seconds. It's just hit 6 o'clock, so I'm going to have to go and feed the cats after this. But certainly, yeah. In fact, so if you want to hold the fort for 30 seconds, I'll go and get some special visitors. I'll be right back.
Sure. Aw, yay. You have played Pokemon previously. Let me know what your favorite Pokemon is. If you say Pikachu, that's... Oh, I don't want to say that's basic. I mean, Pikachu's cute, but... Let's pick a non-Pikachu Pokemon. So for inserting the details for the Pokemon, do we have to be specific on what data is needed? For inserting the details for the Pokemon, do we have to be specific on what data is needed to be typed? Yes, I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, yes, you have to be specific that like it's in a specific order. So it has to be ID, then the name, then the height, then the weight, and then the types. Yep, so you'll be able to look at the sample commands on the spec, and it gives examples of like what data will need to be typed. Cute. Tom, what are the names of your cats?
Sorry?
What are the names of your cats? Or is it one cat? Or
there are 2 cats in the house, but only one of them who I thought would be willing to sit around long enough to be on camera.
Yeah. Oh, cute. Other one's camera shy.
Yeah, just a bit. Hold on, let me try and fix up my camera so it's full screen. Oh, I think she may be blocking on the... One moment while I get her off my trackpad. Oh, calm down, my dear. Can I edit? Yes, I can. Oh, no, don't go, no.
Yes, to answer the question, there are auto tests for each stage.
Okay, there we go. I'll be back in 1 moment. I'm just going to grab her again. Okay. I will stop bothering my cats now.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yes, they're getting hungry as well. So it doesn't look like there are any questions, and I can see on our viewer statistics that people are slowly going away, though I would expect a little spike where the cat appears on camera. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Helen. If only they were more cooperative and wanted to appear on camera more often. We often call them in this course, they're the course admins in charge. So my job is course admin, but they rule over me with an iron fist, and they keep me on my deadlines. So that's them appearing to tell me my next deadline is feeding them. So thank you very much, Zoe, for coming today, and thank you everyone for coming along. We're really grateful for your work on writing the assignment, and I hope you're all looking forward to completing it. Again, get in touch if you've got any questions on the forums with your tutors. There's lots of places you can get help. But apart from that, I think we'll end the stream there. Oh.
Yay. All right. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
There's a very brief question there, which I'll answer quickly. Which stages do you need to do your own testing on? All of the stages, you could just double check that the code works as expected. But for stages 4 and 5, you'll have to submit your own tests. So those are the only two stages 4 and 5. But oh, and there's a question there. Right as we're trying to finish that, that's all good. What do I mean by assignment released by draft? I assume you mean released as a draft. Mm-hmm. So we just mean that the auto tests hadn't been finalized yet, and we wanted to make sure it was available so you could all look through it in your tutes this week. But we didn't want to release the auto tests until they were perfectly 100% ready. So you can absolutely get started, but the auto tests won't be available until sometime tomorrow is my bet. Mm-hmm. Alrighty. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful evening and a wonderful week, and we'll see you all soon. All right. Bye.
Thanks.